that close enough?
It'll pick up.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, well, that's. Someone will bump it.
I'm just sitting there. Because I have no. There's two here. There's there. It's tiny.
What? What, whether it works or not? Over the cold, I hope. Won't be many playing golf today, I don't think. All right, yeah. Is this? All right, yeah. Yeah. Pressure's on, like, isn't it? It looks that way. Yeah, I guess. Yeah. You like this? Hey.
We needed a tequila shot this morning just to chill out.
I think I might stand up though. Take care, mate. Catch you.
Sorry, guys.
Are you there yet? I wasn't good. I didn't see you there.
Hey, Mike, you going to rock? Yeah, you going to rock? Mike, you want to see Mike?
Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention, I'd appreciate that. Come through if you'd like to. A wonderful crowd here in Albert Park. I think we are. My name is Darren James. I'm your MC for this wonderful occasion where we celebrate the life of Brian George Duxbury. And not many people have friends where they know their middle name so well. My middle name's Andrew. Who cares? But Brian George Duxbury used to introduce himself every time you'd meet him at the football. And he'd come up, "G'day Darren, Brian George Duxbury." And I'd say, "I know, I've known you for that long." In fact, we met back in 1996 at Victoria Park, and Brian came up to me I've told the story before, it was in the rider stand, and we used to sit there as a family watching the footy, and he said, "Are you that bloke from the radio?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "You're a passionate Pies fan." I said, "My word, I am, I love them." And he said, "Would you be able to come down underneath the rider stand and MC the Woodsman for us? It's the coterie group of Collingwood." I said, "I know about the Woodsman. My old man used to tell me about them, how they were fairly influential people at the club, and they'd support the club and have their own little area." And I said, "I know about the Woodsman." He said, "Well, would you like to come and MC?" And I said, "I'd I'd love to, Brian. So I was nervous, and I got under there, and Brian was the chairman, just been elected, I think. And it went well. I interviewed someone, can't remember, but it went very well. And Brian said, "Thank you for that, Darren." I said, "Well, that was a real thrill. That'll go down as one of the more memorable things I've ever done." And he said, "Well, can you turn up next Saturday, because we're playing Hawthorn?" I said, "I'm what?" And all these years later, I'm still the MC of the Woodsman, thanks to Brian George Duxbury. Wow. And it is an honour to have known the man. And I mean, we all loved him, didn't we? We've got quite a few guests that I'm going to introduce that are going to share their memories and say a few words about Brian. It surprises me, though, he'd always go up to me and introduce himself as Brian George with a Carlton draft in his hand. And I've noticed, ready for us later, it's full of acai. And I said, "Well, Brian's not going to be happy." He said, "Brian arranged it all. Now, what's happened in the last few weeks?" But no, I found out, you learn something every day, that he did want the acai. There's a bit of Japanese in Brian, I think, maybe, but that's all there ready to go. I digress. I once made him laugh, I remember. It was the biggest laugh I ever got from him. And we both had a couple at this particular match, which was not that unusual. We had a Carlton draft each. And I said, "Hey, Brian." He said, "Yeah, Jamesy, what?" I said, "You know how we're the Magpie Army?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "Because we're the Woodsmen, does that make us the SAS of Collingwood?" And he stood back and he looked at me. Look at us. Are you kidding? No chance. We are just a group who are dedicated to Collingwood, and my word, he was. How does someone come down from Queensland as a rugby man and get so involved and dedicated to a club like Collingwood? I tried to put myself in the reverse situation. Would you go up and follow the Broncos and become so passionate about a club like the Brisbane Broncos or similar? I think the answer is no, but the way he loved the Pies, I mean, this is what it's all about. How good to the club to give us for the day, the premiership trophies. Relax, everybody. As I said, we've got a celebration to be had of the life of Brian George Duxbury. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce our first speaker. He's a man that he knew Dux for, well, an eternity. He met back in 1982, 44 years ago. They were involved in the Elwood RSL. They were heavily involved down at the Lakeside Golf Course. Wayne Carroll is here, ladies and gentlemen. Please make him welcome.
Good morning, everybody. A couple of months ago, Brian told me about his plan for today. He said he wanted me to say a few words about our journey, the RSL club, the Lakeside Golf Club. I responded and said, "You sure you want me to do that, mate? You know, I'm a big sook." Which she gave me the Brian George stare and said, "Don't you bloody cry." So, mate, I'm going to give it my best. No promises. I met Brian 44 years ago when Gina and I migrated south of the border from Sydney. Before we left, a colleague was questioning why I was both going down there. The only good thing that came out of Melbourne was the Hume Highway. Unfortunately, that bloke couldn't be more wrong, because I met Brian George. The only people we knew in Melbourne at the time were Peter and Janice Smith. And not long after arriving in Melbourne, they invited us to their house for their little girl Karina's birthday. When we arrived, the front door was open. There was a guy standing just inside. He turned around with a big smile and said, "Oh, my name's Brian George Duxbury. Have a beer." With that, he placed an icy cold BB stubby in my hand. What a sweet talk. We got to chatting during the afternoon and found out a few things in common. We both played rugby league, he in Queensland, me in New South Wales. So we immediately established a state of origin rivalry. We continued right through until now. We both played squash. We went to a weekly catch up every Sunday morning for an hour and a half as we go and help each other. At the Garden Vale squash course, we both like to punt on the horses. So we got to go know the Duxburys really well on the Smiths, and They were from Queensland, we were from New South Wales, so we were orphans down here. So we regularly caught up for barbecues, family birthdays and Christmases together. And I also learned pretty quickly from Brian that there was no such thing as a beard. In 1984, Jen and I returned to Sydney, but Brian and I stayed in touch. He travelled to Sydney for work regularly. He always made time for me to catch up with him, have a few beers, even if it was just on the way as he was leaving town. He just happened to be in Sydney when our firstborn Jennifer arrived. Agreed to catch up at his favourite restaurant in Sydney, the San Francisco Grill Room at the Hilton Hotel for dinner. Not surprising, Brian was a good mate with the mate to be. He made sure that we were well looked after that night. At 11 p.m. that night, Brian insisted on both of us standing up and singing happy birthday to Jenny because she was one day old. Of course, Brian couldn't help himself. He had to go around and get all the remaining patrons up and doing the same. It was a good evening. He convinced me to stay in his room that night and set me up on the couch. I'd had a couple of solid days. Being a bit tired and emotional, I didn't wake up until late. When I did, Brian was gone. He left a note to say, "Take your time, mate." He'd also been out shopping because he'd bought it. Beside the note was a toothbrush, toothpaste, a new shirt, and a new tie. No surprise, the tie was black and white. In 1989, G and I returned to Melbourne. We found a place to live near Elsman Park. Brian and Colin were nearby in Benton. Taking a walk one day along Ormond Road, Elwood, I happened upon the Elwood Parasol Club. So I'd have to go in and check it out, and I found out that a BB stubby was only $2.30. And only $2.10 a bottle, if you remember. It was only $10 if you remember. So I immediately signed up and rang Brian and said, "Mate, I found us a watering hole." Thus began the tradition of the Thursday night catch-ups at the RSL. Couple of games of snooker, followed by the chook raffle, quite a few beers. Didn't take long for Brian, as usual, to make friends with the manager, the bar staff, and all the members there. Became intimately involved with everybody there, and the RSL club became sort of an extension of the family. Unfortunately, the club itself was shut down in 2012, but that Thursday night catch-up tradition continues today at nearby Elwood Tavern. Around the end of 97, Brian was advised by his doctor that he and I should look for an alternative to squash, as he felt that the way we were going, Brian was either going to have a stroke or a heart attack. Ironically, he ended up having both, despite the fact that he did give up squash. Taking his advice, we started playing golf at Albert Park. 9 holes on a Friday evening in the daylight saving. A few weeks after, we noticed that there was a pro shop, there was an ad for this golf club called Lakeside. We made some inquiries and we ended up joining up in the beginning of 98. Again, it wasn't long before Brian got himself involved and we found ourselves with a whole new family. Brian became a stalwart of the club, actively involved in and supporting the club. So much so that in 2020 he was recognised by the Club of Life Action. Due to his health in recent years, he stopped playing golf but continued to support the club. He regularly dropped in to catch up with the team on comp days and was actively involved in organising the end year presentation dinners and Christmas functions. In fact, last year he was still giving instructions on what to do when he fed into the ring. I last spoke to Brian the evening before he died. It was not a long conversation. He was struggling to speak. Forgot to say how much we meant to each other. He finished up saying he was a bit tired. There's some sad to shut up. That we'd catch up again soon. And he signed off in a typical fashion, aimed at making me feel better by saying, "Anyway, WC, thank you for being here." After hanging up, I sent him the following text. "Hi, Brian George, my absolute best mate. You are the big brother, always looking out for the younger one, me. You are the most astute bloke I've ever had the pleasure of meeting. We've been together for 44 years, never a cross word, only the best of intentions and support. I love you, Brian, with everything I have, and I'll always keep you close. Brian always greeted people with a smile and a story or two. He had boundless generosity, compassion, and loyalty to those he held dear. He had supreme confidence in his ability to make things happen for the better. He also could be a bit of a mischievous rogue and mood. Bye, mate. And on behalf of all your friends and family at the RSL and the Golf Club, rest in peace.
Thank you so much, Wayne. It's got him up the back a bit low there. We might try and crank it up a bit here. I hope I'm doing the right thing. There we go. Thank you so much, Wayne. Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker, quite a few former chairmen of the Woodsmen are here, obviously, and our next speaker is included in that group. She is also the current secretary of the Woodsmen, and Brian was very, very close to Kim, and I know, like we all did, we loved him dearly. And our next person to say a few words, ladies and gentlemen, is Kim Long.
Hello, everyone. Can everyone hear okay? Sure. Okay. Whew, big day. When Brian asked me to speak today, I felt incredibly honoured. Brian was the heart of the Woodsman for so many years. Alongside Colleen, he worked tirelessly behind the scenes, never looking for recognition, simply wanting to make the Woodsman the very best it could be. He was organised, dependable, very kind, and incredibly generous with his time. If something needed doing, Brian was probably already doing it. Since Brian passed, my phone has been flooded with messages, different people, different words, but every message has said the same thing: Brian made us feel welcome. Whether you'd known Brian for 20 years or 20 minutes, he greeted you with the same warm smile, the same genuine interest, and somehow made you feel like you belong. I don't think there could be a finer legacy than that. But the Brian we loved definitely wasn't all work. He loved a beer, he loved a chat, and he was always the last to leave. A few years ago, the bar closed early at a Woodsman function. I managed to get it reopened and quietly let a few members know. Brian immediately grabbed my hand and said, "Let's go," as we rushed back to the bar for one last beer while ever-patient Colleen rolled her eyes. That was Brian. There was always time for one last drink, one last chat, and one more laugh. Brian leaves an enormous hole in the Woodsman and in the hearts of everyone who had the privilege of knowing him. Brian, thank you for everything you've given to the Woodsman and to all of us who were lucky enough to call you our friend. I'll miss your beaming smile, your stories, your quiet wisdom, and especially our weekly, sometimes daily chats. And yes, your one last beer. Your catchphrase was always, "All the better for seeing you." Well, Brian, we were all the better for seeing you. Thank you for everything. I love you and I'll miss you more than you'll ever know.
Oh, the ever-patient Colleen, that brings back memories. I remember Ducks got a Carlton draft at the end of one game. He said, "Jamesy, over here." And we hid behind Daisy Thomas's floor to ceiling. From Colleen, just we're going to have one more. Anyway, now this is a bit of a sad story. Our next speaker was to be Warrington Hatton, and he was going to come down from Queensland, wasn't he, Colleen, to be here to be part of the celebration of Brian's life. But sadly, he's had a bit of an accident, and he's fallen on his coccyx, hasn't he? And he was desperate to try and get here and can barely sit up. He's in a lot of pain, so sadly he can't be here to say a few words for this special occasion. However, we do have Con Stambanis, who is going to speak on Warrington's behalf. So, Con, if we could have you up to, I think Warrington's made a bit of a speech. Anyway, you'll explain that. Con Stambanis, ladies and gentlemen. that work? Ah, that's better. I think that was turned off the whole time, Con. Not very good for an alleged professional.
As Darren said, Warwick will be here today, so I'll read the following. No, I think it actually said we did Brian George Duxbury. As I'm unfortunately unable to attend today, I just wanted to know that my thoughts and heartfelt condolences are with you at all this very sad time. I had the privilege of knowing Brian for over 6 decades. The friendship began at a surf club on the Gold Coast near Toogan Beach. This surf club was mainly for young tradies and hands-on individuals. They were all tough as nails. So when Brian appeared on the mid-Saturday afternoon, still in his suit, trousers, white shirt, jacket hanging in his car. Brian worked at the time in a Myer store in Brisbane, and the only trading day they had was they worked till Saturday. Most of us never owned a suit. It certainly begged the question, do you think he's okay? I wonder if he bats for the upside. Well, it didn't take long to find out. It turned out he played rugby league for a local Brisbane club, the South Magpies, hence his association with the Colwood Magpies. Brian played in the front row as a centre of confrontation with the opposition. This role required direct physical contact, for which he relished it. The harder it became, the better Brian liked it. So no one questioned him about wearing a suit ever again. I have far too many stories to tell on my association with Duxie, other than it was never boring. I spoke with Scotty yesterday and said no matter when I get upset and sad, I just think of the memories we shared and it works. He was a loyal mate, a good man, and someone I was proud to call a friend. The years may have passed, but the bond of friendship never faded. I will always remember the good times we shared and the moments that made the friendship so special. So Colleen, you were his best fullback ever. He loved you dearly, and as Ed would say to me, she is my one and only. Scotty, he was so proud of you and your wonderful family. His association with Colwood was 100% to the point. It was in his DNA. I was blessed to meet so many of his fellow Wismen on many social occasions. Again, more cherished memories. Rest in peace, my old mate. You will never be forgotten. Warrington Ahad. Whilst I'm here, I want to say a few words on my own. I'm sure everyone here today would agree that we cannot imagine a world without our dear brother. Kerry and I, along with our family, have had the privilege of being friends of Brian's for over 40 years. And when he befriended you, it was for life. His enthusiasm for life was infectious. His kindness and generosity knew no bounds. I recall fondly when we were in Marimula with Brian and Colleen many years ago for a holiday. Brian, myself, and Noel Kiley decided to go to the oyster farm in Pamela. Once loaded up with oysters for dinner, we stopped to have a beverage or two or three, sometimes even 4 or 5, at the famous pub called the Top Pub. Typically, Brian was at the bar buying the first round of drinks. Being the thorough gentleman he was, he introduced himself to Mary, the elderly bartender, and quickly they exchanged their life stories. It seemed that Mary was a big fan of Stitch's clothing. Although Noel told Brian she had a very tough life and certainly couldn't afford such lovely clothes. We left the pub several beers later, but not without Brian having silently taken stock of Mary, what dress size she may be and what colours would flatter her. Brian then got into the phone immediately, calling his office to have an outfit sent up for Mary. No charge, of course. Noel said the look on her face when the clothes arrived at the pub just 3 days later was priceless. She was in tears and totally overwhelmed. No one in her life had ever been so kind or generous to her. That was our Brian to a T. Honestly, I could go on and on. We've had so many wonderful times together. We will miss you, Brian, so much. Rest in peace, my dear friend.
Thank you, Con. Some lovely words there. Also, the words of Warrington Hatton. Hope he gets better. But our next speaker, he's in a bit of trouble too. He had a fall, but he's pushed through. He's been a member of the Woodsman since 1989. I reckon probably knew Dux a little bit before that, maybe. No, met him in 89 when you joined the Woodsman. Joe was walking out the back of his garage. I think the day Dux rode on ahead, and he's face planted, Joe. He's got 5 broken ribs on the right side, 7. I didn't know you had 7 ribs. You're a bit special, Joe, I knew that. 3 broken on the left side and 1 in the back. So to carry him up here now, we have... No, he can make it on his own. Are you right there, Joe? Good to see you. Joe Brancatizano, ladies and gentlemen. Legendary Woodsman. Learning, you'd think there was nothing wrong, wouldn't you? You're a machine.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to just first repeat what everybody said about Brian. Brian George Duxbury was one of a kind. He just had this incredible ability to make you feel like you mattered and that you belonged. His kindness and his patience were things you could always count on, no matter what. Brian and I shared a friendship that words can't quite capture. He was always the first person I called. He was right there to celebrate my good times. And stood by me at my lowest moments when things were tough. Joining the Woodsman in 1989 was honestly one of the best things I ever done. That's where Rosalind and I met Brian, Colleen, and all the Woodsmen for the very first time. Since then, with Rosalind and later with Trina, we've had some amazing experiences together. Whether it was a festive catch-up, our kids' weddings, or traveling the world, we did it all. Whatever needed doing, Brian was the bloke to do it. Whether it was everything he did for the Woodsman, serving as chairman from 1996 to 98, or his time at the Albert Park Golf Club, or anything else that popped up. Brian was always at the forefront, leading the charge. That was just Brian George Duxbury. Brian, I've known you for nearly 40 years. I will always remember you. Rest in peace.
Thank you so much, Joe. Some lovely words there. Our final speaker is part of the Duxbury family, and it is Brian's son, Scott. Now, Scott lives in Connecticut, over in the United States of America. He's involved in money over there. He married Mika, who is Brian's daughter-in-law, and they have 3 children, Max, Adelaide, and Sam. Now, they were unable to get over here because of school, end of the school year, and 13, 15 or 16 and around that, one's going to college. So they fortunately weren't able to make it, but they're being looked after by their mum, Mika. But Scott has made the journey across the Pacific to say a few words about his old man. Ladies and gentlemen, Scott Duxbury.
All right, let's see if we can get through this. Thank you everyone for coming today. Dad would have loved seeing this group all together and definitely would have been having a few beers at the same time. Today's hard, but it's also impossible to talk about Dad without smiling. That was one of his great gifts. Mum and I would also like to thank everyone for their support, kind words, and the help of everyone who's helped us putting this together today. As many of you already said today, Brian George Duxbury, how many times have you heard him using his middle name when he introduced himself or during a story? One thing we always knew about Dad is that he was always up for a fun time, and he made sure everyone was coming along for the party as well. Life was not always a party for my dad though. He started his life in an iron lung in Brisbane Hospital. Some of the younger people here would not even know what an iron lung is, since today they rarely used, and with the use of modern ventilators, they're pretty well extinct. But like many challenges Dad would face in his life, he came through smelling of roses. Dad had an interesting childhood. Being the youngest of 4 brothers, there was always mischief and fights about. Some of the stories I've heard pre and post Dad passing away, listen, they are worth retelling, but not inside a church hall. Sport was Dad's passion, rugby league in particular when he was younger. Being the youngest brother, I guess he was always going to be scrappy. So it made sense that he played hooker for South, Magpies in Brisbane. When I tell friends this, they're always impressed, but even more impressed that he played professionally in Papua New Guinea. I did learn that he won the best and fairest in the season that he played there, but did not receive the award for a few months, as he had jumped on a freight plane back to Brisbane the night before the awards. Funny enough, he was drinking with the freight pilot, and they became friends, and that's how we got a free ride back. I'll always remember the black and white photos he showed me from those games. There's a couple that rolled through up there. The thing that probably sticks more in my memory is his game shorts from playing up there. When we moved to Lily Street in Bentley, he still had them and he mowed the lawn in those. Mum hated those things. And amazingly, at some stage, they disappeared and Dad kept on complaining, he goes, where are they? I said, I'm sure they're in the drawer. While he was playing league, he was also working at Myer, selling lingerie. And I'm not sure how that would have gone down in the changing rooms. But Dad pulled it off. During that time, he also met the love of his life, my mum. Probably the luckiest moment of his life, if I'm being honest. It's also around then when his league career was coming to a close due to his dislocated shoulder. The same shoulder that he dislocated on his wedding night. Before anyone gets any dirty thoughts, it was on the dance floor. Not long after that, Mum and Dad moved to Melbourne from Brisbane, initially with Glen Vogue before Stitches. The move to Melbourne also brought Dad to his new sporting passion, Collingwood. Now, Mum was the person who really got Dad into it. The deal was that every few weeks, Dad would come to a game while Mum and I were going all the time. Not a bad deal for Dad until one wet and windy Saturday at Victoria Park. He was looking across the grounds and saw people walking downstairs into an enclosure at half time. He asked someone near us what the story was with the people all dressed nicely on the other side and where they were going. That would be the first time that Dad would hear the word woodsman. The woodsman would become a central part of the Duxbury's life, with many friends that we consider family today. I spent many a Saturday in the wooden seats with many other woodsman's kids watching the game and getting pies and chips and looking after other younger kids than myself, while our parents were downstairs in the rooms, shall we say, warming up for the game. We also spent many hours waiting to come into the rooms afterwards as well, where I'd meet some amazing people other than the woodsman, like Peter Brock, Wolf Glass, and past and current players at the time. Besides premierships, I think one of Dad's best memories of the Woodsman did not involve football. Back in the day, there used to be a cricket match between the coterie groups, and Dad said I could be a player for the Woodsman. This was back in 1990, so it was already an amazing year for us, as any Essendon fan that is here could quickly remind you of. I was forced to retire on 28 after 6 balls, nearly putting a ball into the Woodsman's room, and then fired down some quickest deliveries for the Woodsman to win the match and the tournament. I won the Man of the Match award, and Dad won the Horse's Arse award for bringing me. He proudly had that trophy of a horse's butt in his office at Stitches that still brings a smile on my face to this day. Dad was not really a cricket player, but he gave it his best against my neighbour mate Shane Peters and I when we played cricket on Lily Street. This was serious business as we had metal stumps, and the neighbour that was behind the stumps, obviously with automatic wiki, had holes through the mesh on his front door from Shane and I peppering Dad with short balls. Now these were tennis balls that Shane and I meticulously crafted with tape, sometimes weighting them to one side, but always making sure they were heavy enough so the ball would come down quicker than usual. These things seriously hurt if they hit you, let alone in the ribs. They repaved the street at one stage, and as a result, there was a little seam on the road that if you hit it just right, would rear up and hit you in the ribs, or sometimes even at your head. Let's just say that Shane and I had great delight bowling at Dad and him not working out how we got that bounce. I'm sure that he had quite a few marks on himself over the years, but he loved every minute of it and never complained. One thing that I inherited from my dad was a love of telling jokes, be it good or bad. Most of them are inappropriate and I can't repeat them in a church hall. So I won't repeat them here, but there was this one he said about the giant lobster, and he seemed to always tell it at the rickshaw inn. I can't remember it, I remember it was terrible, but Dad would always laugh at the punchline, and when he started laughing, everyone always laughed with him. A lot of my friends here today have spent time with my dad in a pub or at the races. Dad's selection of horses left a lot to be desired, and we have a very separate way of picking horses. But I'd like to do form, Dad would do it on what I would say is a gut feel. He had this one theory to always bet on horses that had form of back-to-back fourth places. Then they're going to win. Well, in this day and age, we have AI. So I ran that through the AI model the other night, and it's saying the raw hit rate is somewhere around 10 to 15%. So maybe there is something in that theory, but I still think it's garbage. The best day I had with Dad at the track was at Caulfield Races back in the early 90s. I'd done some form on a horse in their first race at Eagle Farm for the Saturday. It was called Grand Bijou, running 50 to 1. It was a super wet track, and I was telling Dad all about it on a Saturday morning as we headed over to the track. And he decided to have a bit of cash on it as well. Now, technology wasn't that savvy back in the early 90s, and all the rain that they were having caused issues, so there was no vision of the race. So we're there listening to it, and no call of Grand Bijou at any stage. Dad turns around to me and goes, well, gave it a shot. Then you hear the announcer call out, and down the outside comes Grand Bijou, won by 4 lengths. Terrible call. But you could see the math going through our heads at the time, as well as the bookies who've taken the only 2 bets in the race on it. And the cracking of Crown Lagers began. Dad also was going on about a horse called Reef, and that was his best pick of the day. Well, with Crown Lager confidence, we had a little bit of a crack on Reef, and that hit the finish line first, which took our celebrations to another level. I still remember not being able to close my wallet and returning to Lily Street and showing off my winnings to Shane. And let's just say that was a very big night of celebrations, not just for Shane, but for Dad as well. Mum, you probably never saw her in that cast, by the way. I've not lived in Melbourne since 1996, so it has been 30 years of not being able to see my parents on a consistent basis. Flip side of that, ending up being adventures for both Dad and Mum visiting me on multiple continents, around the world, as well as my grandmother Betty. One funny story was meeting up with them in Pietrasanta, Italy for Christmas one year. One of my mates from London, Mike Donato, joined me, and fun was on our minds. After a wonderful Christmas Eve with John and Fina, we went back to the villa where we were staying at around 10 p.m. and everyone was heading to bed. Well, to Mike and I, that was too early for single and carefree lads to be going to bed. We resorted to our teenage years and started to sneak out of the house. As we got to the kitchen, we got busted by Dad. What are you guys doing? As 28-year-olds at that time, we wondered what the protocol was for getting into trouble. Well, I resorted to what Dad had always told me, and that was to tell the truth. We're going to go and see if we can get anywhere still open and get a few more drinks. Well, Dad must have also resorted to his teenage years as well, because he thought this was a great idea and snuck out with us. Mum, I'm presuming you were asleep because no search parties came out looking for us. We ended up at a coffee and ice cream store, and Mikey's Spanish managed to get us 3 beers. Well, this delighted all of us, especially Dad. Brimming with confidence, Dad went up to get the next round. This is where the confusion really set in, because Dad came back saying, I think they said they're closing. Well, panic mode kicked into all of us at that stage, and Dad asked Mikey to go up with his Spanish and see if he can get a slab of beers. Mikey got a dozen beers, so half did his job. And we went back to close out part of the night, drinking a few cold ones with my dad. Many laughs that night, and as we finished the beers, Dad said, all right, we better get off to bed, it's Christmas tomorrow. He went to bed, and Mike and I snuck out again, but that's a totally another story. As much as Dad loved the stories, the sport, the races, the pubs, and the parties, the centre of his life was always family. Me being in the US now for over 20 years, gave my parents a lot of chances to come to the US. First, my wedding to Mika in Jamaica, which quite a few of you here attended, and to see him meet his grandkids. Max, Addie and Sam loved Pop, and Pop loved them. As I mentioned earlier, he loved to tell a joke and stories, and I'm fortunate enough to have photos of the kids hanging on his every word, telling stories about me getting into trouble. Mum, your dance partner was gone, but he has had an amazing life. He did not burn the candle at both ends, he cut it in half and burned it at 4 ends. What an amazing life you two have had together. The memories you created together are incredibly beautiful. Dad made life bigger, louder, funnier and warmer. We're all lucky enough to be along for the ride. Now, in typical Dad fashion, he wants to have the last word. He left a note for me to read, so bear with me while I try and get through this one. Hi all, if Scott is reading this, it means I cannot be there. I have no regrets about the events that have led to this event. I've enjoyed the best life any man could live. A beautiful and loving partner for over 56 years. Colleen, not only my lover and best friend, but one of the most kindest and beautiful people on this planet. I do not know what my life would have been like without her. My son Scott, I love you so much. You gave your mum and I so much happiness, marrying a beautiful person in Mika, and giving us 3 wonderful grandchildren, Max, Adelaide and Sam. They are something special. You've conducted your life with dignity, honesty and integrity. We are so very proud of you. To my dear friends, there are so many, Joe, Vina, Neville and Margaret, Mike and Gail, thanks for all the great times. Together, sorry. All my friends from the Woodsman and Lakeside Golf Club, what wonderful times we had together. Wayne, we were like brothers. You're a very special person that helped make my journey through life one hell of a trip. Thank you for being you. I could go on and on about all the wonderful people in this room, but all I can say is thank you for making the journey through life so enjoyable. So enjoy a cold beer and make sure you have one for me. Cheers, BGD.
Thank you so much, Scott. There we go, ladies and gentlemen. And well, in this, it is a religious place, and it doesn't matter what religion you are. I have this theory that if you're in a place of religion, the message will get through to wherever ducks will be. It's like parking outside a Telstra tower. You know that the call's going to go through. So ducks, I've got a message for you. Billy Frampton got off. I hope he got that. Ladies and gentlemen, to finish up, he'd love to hear the song, I reckon. If you'd please be upstanding for Brian George Duxbury. And we'll send him off with the Collingwood theme song. 2, 3, 4.
Good old Collingwood forever. They don't have a play game. Side by side they stick together to uphold the Magpies' name. See the barrackers shouting as old barrackers should. For the apprenticeships to pay for the good old Collingwood.
Hip hip! Hooray! Hip hip! Hooray! Hip hip! Hooray! To Brian George Duxbury, thank you for being you. Ladies and gentlemen, please stick around and enjoy each other's hospitality, and thank you for attending.
Sorry.